very warm welcome. My name's David Roth and I'm the CEO of the store WPP and Chairman of BAV. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Follow the Sun, 24 hours of broadcasting right across the world, to celebrate the launch of the WPP BAV Best Countries study for 2022, produced in conjunction with the US News and Wharton Business School. It's a pleasure to have you join us for this session. This broadcast is going to travel right across the world, starting in New Zealand and ending 24 hours later in the USA. We have an absolutely packed broadcast today. This year's Best Countries study is our fullest and most comprehensive yet. The attitudes of global business leaders, opinion formers and citizens towards nation strengths has changed dramatically in recent years, never more so than in 2022. And we'll be looking at how those changes in values have impacted overall perceptions of our 85 nations covered in the 2022 study. But perceptions of a country only tell half the story. We'll then visit 24 countries to hear what's happening from WPP experts on the ground and sometimes how perceptions of a country don't really reflect the situation. Now, our time together promises to be informative, challenging, stimulating, and I hope fun. So let's get started. How a country is viewed around the world is of huge importance, politically, economically, and socially. It has the ability to contribute to both a nation's hard and soft power. The Romans understood this well. SPQR, an abbreviation for Centanus Populosque Romanus, was arguably the first country branding. It was an emblematic, abbreviated phrase referring to the government of the ancient Roman Republic. You only needed to see the emblem, and invaded countries knew exactly what was in store for them. So country branding itself is not new, but measuring it is. Now in our 7th year, the WPP BAV Annual Best Countries Rankings measures global perceptions of countries against a series of characteristics, impressions that have the potential to drive trade, travel and investment. They also directly affect brands. The study was developed by WPP BAV, the Wharton Business School of the University of Pennsylvania, and US News. The ranking is based on a large global survey which asks a range of people about how they perceive different countries against a range of key attributes. Country branding also has a significant impact on corporate and product brands. The words "made in" can instantly lend credibility and trust to a product or brand that a consumer hasn't previously encountered. That could be enough to convince someone to buy and beyond that, convince them to pay a premium. Likewise, "made in" can prove an instant turn-off if a consumer associates the country of origin with poor safety standards or sees it as being behind the times on social issues or workers' rights. But it's not just a one-way reaction. The perceptions and performance of brands abroad feedback into the development of the country itself. Additionally, willingness for corporates to invest vital FDI is also closely linked to the strength of a country's brand. As local brands and businesses succeed, they generate economic growth as well as lending further positive associations to their country's brand. There's a close relationship between how people feel about a country and their attitudes towards the brand they associate with that country. Strong countries fuel strong brands and vice versa. Think of France and Chanel. Both represent elegance, glamour and prestige. Chanel is intrinsically French and France is synonymous with Chanel. The same can be said of Italy and Ferrari, or Japan and Sony. In each case, brands and the countries are part of a virtuous circle, a symbiotic relationship. In fact, Germany is a really fine example of this symbiosis in action. Germany has come to represent the qualities of durability and engineering that brands like Bosch, BMW, Audi and Mercedes have shown the world that Germany can deliver. Brands can both shape and be shaped by the perceptions of their country of origins. Japan in the 1970s was known as a cheap manufacturing base, but now respected as a world leader for quality electronics and also technology, thanks largely to brands like Sony and Toyota. South Korea has taken a similar path, with Samsung and Hyundai demonstrating to the entire world what modern South Korea is and is doing, so creating consumer predisposition in international markets that favour other South Korean brands. There's a two-way reaction and a multiplier effect for both. This year's study quantifies the impact. We see that 83% of consumers globally agree that consumer brands play an important role in defining a country's culture. 78% also agree that the country a product is made in impacts my preference to purchase it. Our annual Best Countries ranking was first launched in 2016 at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, the world's largest gathering of global leaders and heads of industry and influence. It's now in its 7th year, and given how turbulent the past 7 years have been across the globe, enables us to see the impact of the changes. The Best Country ranking incorporates the views of close to 18,000 individual members of the public and business decision makers, surveyed in 85 countries across the world. This year's survey was completed in mid-2022. Collectively, the 85 countries in the 2022 rankings account for about 95% of global gross domestic product per capita and represent 80% of the world's population. Individuals surveyed for Best Countries were asked how closely they associated 73 attributes with a range of countries. These attributes were then grouped into 10 categories that were used to calculate the Best Countries ranking, and more on those attributes later. So come with me as we meet our first guests on our interview stage. Well, I'm very delighted now to be joined by Lord Jim O'Neill, the former Chief Economist of Goldman Sachs and a former government UK Minister and Chairman of Chatham House. Jim, Lord O'Neill, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
President Zelensky has said that the price we have to pay for avoiding a third world war is going to be higher energy bills, increases in the cost of living, and a reduction in living standards. And this comes at a time where we see from our BAV Best Countries study that softer values, sort of like quality of life and social purpose, are much more important in defining a nation's brand. But do you think that public opinion at the moment will pressurise governments to hold their current policies, or do you think they will start to look at alternatives?
Nice, easy question that you start with. I don't know, because it is probably for my generation, never mind the younger generation, the first such issue of this scale and complexity that we've seen. So far, it appears Western nations, who are the prime supporters of Ukraine, of course, have been happy to support the government stance on Ukraine, and superficially accept the cost, which is essentially this enormous cost of living shock. But it remains to be seen how that passes the test of time. So as we're seeing here, the government itself is almost definitely going to have to pay for the cost of this dilemma. I can't help finishing my answer to this very tricky question by also pointing out that if we really want to be serious about climate change and alternative energies, having a permanently higher price for carbon emitting energy forms is probably ultimately the sort of thing that is needed. One would imagine accelerate the desire for alternative energies to become more and more part of everyday life.
Now, you were chairman of the Chatham House, one of the world's leading think tanks. Its mission of a world that is sustainable, secure and prosperous is great. What do you feel, how far are we from realising that goal?
Isn't and hasn't really worked the way it's supposed to do on the tin.
So Jim, what should the priorities of nations be then now?
Yeah, so what should we do about it? You know, I've become linked to a number of things I've been involved in, a big believer in what I broadly call profit with purpose. And we need to have business itself think more about the societal remit of who ultimately they serve. We've lived in an era, and still do, of where the only thing that matters for many, certainly publicly quoted business, is the shareholder. And it's not enough. And private business shouldn't be rewarded if we don't have productivity that goes with these big gains for them. And policymakers need to be more alert to the realities of life rather than just what was in economic textbooks of the 1960s and 70s. And if we don't learn from that, I have a fear that some of the dilemmas that have just blown up dramatically in the past few years out of nowhere could actually get worse.
Now, we started with a hard question, so let's end with an easy one. Lord O'Neill, are you an optimist or a pessimist given the situation we see around the world today?
Right now, I feel a lot more pessimistic than I've done for a long time. However, that said, I've been around the policy area in many different forms for over 40 years, and I've lived through a lot of crises. And the one thing I know for sure is that the crisis you're in, even though it often seems the worst you've ever been through, they come to an end. And one of the big things I've learned is never let a crisis go to waste. And indeed, the making of a business, a leader, or of a country is how they respond to the crisis you are in, because it normally defines how you're going to deal with the future era. So in that sense, there are lots of ways of things that could emerge from all of this mess in a more positive way.
Well, Lord Jim O'Neill, ending on a slightly more positive note than we started, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a privilege to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me joining you.
As we travel around the world together in our Follow the Sun broadcast, we'll be hearing news, views and insights from local WPP company colleagues in 24 of the 85 countries covered in the WPP BAV Best Countries study for 2022. Now, before we go to one of those countries, let's remind ourselves of the WPP BAV Best Countries 2022 rankings from the 85th down to the number 1 country. Let's see what the overall findings of Best Countries 2022 are before we go to Qatar for local insights from the WPP team there. And don't forget to download the Best Countries Metaverse experience for even more global insights from the address on your screen. Historically, military power and finance, banks and tanks were the attributes against which we measured a country's power in the world. Not anymore. So what does all this mean? It shows that a nation focused on providing great quality of life for its people, which cares about the rights and equality, and has a focus on entrepreneurship, is seen as having the most powerful nation brand. This reflects a world today and the factors that influence public perceptions and consumer decision-making, and by implication, a nation's political policy making. So let's take a look at those 10 factors and their weights for 2022. Entrepreneurship, 14.2%. Cultural influence, 10.4%. Power, 5%. Heritage, 3.1%. Adventure, 5.5%. Quality of life, 14.5%. Open for business, 9.3%. Social purpose, 13.5%. Agility, 14%. Movers, 10.6%. So it's clearly no longer just tanks and banks that give a country influence around the world. Softer power, which comes about as a result of entrepreneurship and cultural exports, is increasingly making an impact.
Hi, I'm Shadi Janhu, the Managing Director of Wunderman Thompson Doha. Welcome to Qatar, a place I call my second home. I'm so excited to introduce to you this beautiful, diverse, and culturally rich nation. Qatar is a nation in the process of rapid transformation while still being rooted in its heritage. It's future-driven with a 2030 vision to get even more robust. Qatar might be tiny with a population of nearly 3 million, but it's mighty and hosts over 88% of foreign expats, making it truly a global country. More than half of the population in Qatar lives and works in Doha and within it. Doha is divided into different regions, like Lusail, the Pearl, and the famous West Bay, Qatar. Each city is unique and infused with culture and entertainment and gives so much to experience. West Bay District is recognized as one of the city's most luxurious regions, where diplomats live and many foreign embassies are situated. Lusail City is a futuristic, modern haven. It features an iconic stadium that will be hosting the opening and closing ceremony of the World Cup, as well as a stunning Parisian-inspired mall, Place Vendôme, incredible architecture, and so much more. Lusail is rightly claimed to be the smartest, most technologically advanced city in the region. Now, Mshaib downtown Doha, the heart of Doha, is an excellent spot for everything related to Qatar's food, culture, and leisure. It's one of the most sustainable city districts, employing a new approach to urban planning by combining traditional methods and modern technology to preserve Qatar's environment and heritage. We at Wunderman Thompson consider ourselves extremely lucky to be part of the nation's development and work with some of the pioneering brands leading the way forward. In the past, Qatar's global brand approached UK-based agencies to handle their account. That was the trend, because they didn't believe they have enough talents or good agencies to cater for their requests in the local market. This has greatly changed over the past 8 years or past decade, let's say. Now, based in Qatar, we have handled Q&B globally from 2012 until 2020. We have contributed to the worldwide repositioning campaign of Qatar Airways from a five-star airline to going places together in collaboration with our offices in the UK. And in 2019, we even won Al Jazeera News Channel, which is the top pan-Arab news network and has also achieved a significant success in broadcasting with being a well-known name worldwide for sports enthusiasts. We believe this proves that the mindset has shifted to working with local multinational agencies based in Qatar instead of dealing with overseas-based agencies. It ensures that Qatar is attracting talents from all over the world, which are the assets of any advertising agency. As you know, we'll be hosting the World Cup starting November 20, which is almost a month from today. So it's truly a historical moment for us, being one of the smallest countries to host it, and the first Arab country to ever host this monumental event. I believe this World Cup will be of many firsts and major development. So let me take you through some of the highlights that will show you why the Qatar World Cup 2022 is more than just a tournament for us. This World Cup is set to make history by hosting the tournament during the winter, thus, for the first time ever, bringing flexibility based on climate and other conditions to the World Cup. Qatar is also implementing a solid sustainability strategy in every aspect of this World Cup planning, design, and management. The commitment to deliver the world's first carbon-neutral World Cup shows how Qatar is adamant to do so. On-site generated solar power and the new metro system connecting the stadiums contribute to reduced emissions. The small size of Qatar also results in the compactness of the tournament, placing the stadium within a 30-mile radius and further contributing to reduced carbon emissions. With the pace in which Qatar has tackled many challenges, from climate challenges to logistics and even investing in sustainability, we believe this World Cup will leave behind a legacy, not only to speak about, but one many nations will learn from.
Technology is such a huge driving force in Qatar. It always has been. Just in the last year, we've made so many important strides in the technology and communications sector. Not only do we have one of the highest internet infiltrations in the world, but we're also being ranked one of the leading countries in terms of ICT adoption. As one of the early adopters of 5G, the local telecom market has seen strong growth over recent years, and we only expect this to multiply even further. We're seeing the importance of tech in almost every aspect of life, from business to gaming and even sports. Technology is constantly changing our lives. It's helping us connect with people from all over the world, transforming education and the way that we learn, and even making life-saving impacts with medical technology. Business productivity has certainly increased, and even food production, agriculture, and transportation have changed because of it. There's a newly realized huge influx of tech startups, with the likes of Google and Microsoft Cloud powering local enterprises. These startups are witnessing a growth in the value of investments raised in the last 2 years, showing an increase of around 250% since 2020. Fintech has also been a great area of interest that's seen a giant boom, with Qatar Central Bank issuing its first ever license for digital payment services to iPay in Qatar, allowing for payments to be made via Google, Samsung, and Apple Pay. Big data is also emerging as a powerful business tool across various industries, and the organizations in Qatar are among global leaders in using these tools to transform the digital economy. Technology is used daily throughout the country, from smart transportation, digital wallet and payment options, smart living spaces, and so much more. We're excited to be paving the way for a fully digital world where knowledge and communication is shaping our development for the better, as a nation, as a community, and as individuals as well.
Hello from Sheriff Downtown Doha. Allow me to introduce myself to you. I'm Mariam Al Jassim. I'm the PR and Communication Manager at Share Properties. I would like to discuss how women are paving the way for the future in Qatar, a cause I'm passionate about. Now is time of a great transformation, and in this regard, many changes are happening during this transitional phase in Qatar. We are all excited of the FIFA World Cup 2022 and the buzz it brings, as well as the growth our nation will experience as a result of this event. I would like to highlight some of the big strides Qatar has taken with regards to women, both in the workforce and the leading big initiatives in the nation. To begin with, let me emphasize on the massive step made by FIFA, in which the World Cup in Qatar will be the first to include 3 women referees, and 3 women assistant referees officiating the tournament. So we hope that this historical moment will open many more opportunities for women in sports. In addition to this, our talented women artists are taking the spotlight with the official poster of the FIFA World Cup 2022. It has been designed by a very gifted Qatari woman. Even behind the scene, there are also many women who play a big part within the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy, the entity responsible for organizing the FIFA World Cup, even other local entities. On another note, I would also like to talk about day-to-day progress in Qatar. Universities, for example, have experienced a big rise in enrollment of young women in different majors. This has transformed the Qatari workforce segmentation into having the highest percentage of women compared to other GCC countries. Our 2030 vision aims to increase the ratio further, as well as put more women in leadership positions. Like, for example, Qatar is proud to have 2 women featured in the Forbes 50 most powerful businesswomen list, not only in the representation of a woman in a global scale stronger than ever, but it also is on the national level. Like, for example, the health ministry in Qatar is led by a woman, and the foreign ministry is represented by a spokeswoman. I believe this is a beautiful time for women who are from and reside in Qatar. Lastly, I would like to say that we look forward to a future which is shaped by strong women.
Hi, we have seen what the FIFA World Cup 2022 is bringing to Qatar. But I am here to talk about our nation's efforts outside the World Cup bid and the development of modern and smart cities while preserving their heritage. I am Dr. Hafez Ali Abdullah, Director of Marketing and Communication at Mshera Properties. Our country's National Vision 2030 is the backbone of our current progress. Qatar is building smart cities, deploying Internet of Things technology, boosting e-learning, and remodeling cities focused on digital transformation and sustainable goals. For instance, over $5.5 billion has been invested at the heart of Doha alone to rebuild a place we call Msherab Downtown Doha, one of the world's first downtown regeneration projects and one of the smartest and sustainable cities on earth. Qatar, as a whole, has also implemented many smart and sustainable initiatives, which is geared toward decreasing carbon emissions and leveraging technology to make it both environmentally friendly and convenient to its residents. We should not forget that this digital transformation, our identity and heritage are being preserved. As Qataris, we take a pride in our heritage and culture, which are passed on to us through generations. At Mshera Properties, we ensured to preserve the heritage through projects such as Mshera Museums, 4 historic houses that hold untold stories from Qatar's socio-economical history, and through our city's architectural language that is modern but yet inspired by traditional Qatari designs. We are offering people an opportunity to learn about legacies and traditions while creating spaces where local and tourists can discover more about the Qatari cultural heritage. People have always depended on the past to build the future. And here at Mshera Properties, we believe in the same. We have and will continue to build our future on the foundation of the past.
Qatar is more than a country with a diverse and growing population. It is a country sitting atop the world stage. We see global sporting events like the Asian Games and the World Cup give Qatar an international audience. We see Qatar Airlines connect us to the world and the world to us. Qatar is a nation that is stepping up the game and raising the bar to be world-class across all sectors, Qatar's future is strong, with the government accelerating economic diversification and supporting local businesses in their global expansion initiatives. With the help of strategic plans to boost the quality of talent locally, as well as reach a more global audience, a thriving financial sector is growing, and Qatar is developing into an international financial hub. With these new ventures and large-scale events building a more active business and leisure tourism industry for Qatar, businesses are now more than ever creating high-value products and services that appeal to global audiences. Take our development, Place Vendôme Shopping Mall, which brings some of the world's biggest names to Qatar with one of the largest luxury precincts in the world, along with more than 560 best-in-class popular brands. Place Vendôme epitomizes the audacious vision and drive that defines Qatar's ambition for growth, innovation, and leadership. As the retail landscape evolves with Place Vendôme as a catalyst, it caters to the needs of an increasingly brand-conscious customers and brings global shopping to the country. At Place Vendôme, we change the game by thriving to be a global destination, by bringing in global brands that are new to Qatar and investing to bring flagship stores for many of our favorites, by nurturing local brands, entrepreneurs, and ideas born in Qatar, and by delivering an architectural masterpiece to rival its inspiration, a destination for global tourism. We understand our audience, and we are evolving, growing, and prospering with them. From a small nation to a global powerhouse, that is our goal.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted now to be joined by Dr. Stacey Graham, who is the Global Racial Equity Program Director at WPP. Stacey, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
This year we see social purpose becoming significantly important, which is a good thing. Why do you think that's so?
I believe in the survey you define social purpose around a few categories, such as caring about gender and racial equity, the environment, human rights, and so forth, right? And what we understand about humans is we have an innate desire to have a reason for being. That's another word for purpose. So I'd say if we look at what's happened in the world in the last 2.5, 3 years, that is definitely catapulted into the mainstream. We have all these things coming together that are pinpointing, illustrating how we're failing as a collective.
And do you think that failure as a collective is something that's now being exposed right across the globe?
Absolutely. I would say that even before 2020, we could see it happening, but there's something about a restriction of freedom of movement, right, that makes people sit at home and have nothing else to do but recognize and look into everything that's wrong with the world, if you will. And so I think that it's on people's minds. What does it mean to be in the collective when I'm sitting at home and can't leave my house anymore? What does it mean to really be connected as a society? How do we care for the most vulnerable? And to be really honest, with COVID-19, we didn't do a great job of that. So I think people are asking different questions than they were 2 to 3 years ago.
And I think I found it quite interesting to see the relationship between this movement, I mean, let's call it a movement, coming from the population upwards.
Absolutely. I mean, we also see that some of our health officials do move more politically than we would have expected. But there were people across the world who made the decision to wear a mask even when it was no longer mandated, who stayed at home even when they didn't want to, who got on the streets for probably the largest social movement since 1968, right? It was a global social movement to bring awareness to racial inequality. So I think there's a coming together even in times of divisiveness.
Now, one of the things we've seen in the study is this sort of interrelationship between a country's brand and companies' brands, and we're seeing that interrelationship even more sort of mingled and prevalent this year. So what should companies do to improve their social purpose in relation to how their country is seen?
That is a great question. I think that is something that they're still figuring out. But one thing we know for sure is people aren't simply incentivized by money. That's not enough to keep employees today. Employees want to work somewhere where they feel proud of not only the work that they do, but the things that the company stands for. They want to see their company standing up for social issues that they personally care about.
Stacey, why do you think suddenly companies are finding a political voice as opposed to purely a corporate voice?
I think to an extent, we have been able to observe this shift away. When I studied, there was a clear connection. The business strategy has to align with shareholder value. That's all we care about, maximizing shareholder value. And there was a notion that maximizing shareholder value stood in opposition to a social purpose, if you will. And today, I think people are recognizing that's actually not true. And we increase shareholder value when we can ensure that we have high employee engagement, low turnover, and people care about what they do in the company they work for.
Well, Stacey Graham, that's a fantastic place to stop. This whole topic is something that we are all going to have to understand a lot better, and not just understand it, but also ensure that it's actions as opposed to merely words. But for the moment, Dr. Stacey Graham, the Global Racial Equity Programs Director at WPP, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.
Hello and a very warm welcome. My name's David Roth and I'm the CEO of the store WPP and Chairman of BAV. Thank you very much indeed for joining me in this very special metaverse experience. Exploring the WPP BAV Best Countries 2022 study in conjunction with Wharton Business School and US News. Here we are in the arrivals hall where you'll be able to discover the key insights from this year's study relating to global trends. Here you'll also find exclusive interviews with global experts and analysis of the data. And what a year we've had. There have been a lot of changes from last year. From here you can also go and visit the 85 countries that are ranked in this year's report. Each of those countries have their own individual room where you can explore a wealth of data and insights into each individual country. You might well see some surprises along your journey. And in the departure area, you can discover more about the study itself. Enjoy your trip around the BAV Best Countries 2022 Metaverse. Well, we're almost at the end of our broadcast. A big thanks to everybody from the local WPP companies who've participated, and of course our central team that's put together all of our Follow the Sun 24 hours of broadcasting, to our directors, to Indus Gupta, to Paul Reifer, and our producers, Sarah Cousins and Lady Victoria Robinson. Well, all it's left for me, David Roth at WPP, to say thank you very much indeed for joining, and the next broadcast follows shortly on the hour.
If you're done